Traymore Hotel, Atlantic City, Saturday afternoon, July 1948. Edward Nowak, 36, shipping clerk at a wholesale hardware company in South Philadelphia, standing in the lobby with his wife and 2 children and 3 suitcases that had been packed since Wednesday. He had taken the train from the Reading Terminal in Philadelphia that morning. The ride was under 2 hours. He had made it once a year since 1941, except for the 3 years the Army had the hotel. He knew, before the bellhop reached him, which side of the building the room would be on, because he had requested it in the letter he sent in April. Ocean side. Above the 5th floor. He had not asked for the ocean view because it was beautiful. He had asked for it because from the 5th floor and above, the sound of the boardwalk crowd at night settled into something that did not keep the children awake. The lobby of the Traymore in July 1948 was not a room a person walked through on the way to a bed. It was the first stage. It was the place where the week announced itself. The front desk knew his name before he said it, because the reservation letter from April was in the file and the Traymore had been receiving letters like his since 1915, since the hotel had been rebuilt and reinforced concrete by an architect named William Price who understood that the lobby of a boardwalk hotel was not a corridor. It was the room where a shipping clerk from South Philadelphia stopped being a shipping clerk from South Philadelphia and became, for 7 days, a guest of the Traymore. What did Edward Nowak expect the Traymore to give him that he could not have given himself, and what did the lobby, the oceanside room above the 5th floor, and the reservation letter sent in April have to do with the answer? What Edward Nowak expected was not the ocean. He lived 90 miles from the ocean. He could have driven to the Jersey Shore for the day. What he expected was the institution. The Traymore Hotel had been built twice. The first time, in 1879, it was a 10-room wooden boarding house named after a Maryland estate. A winter storm tore it apart in 1884. It was rebuilt, expanded, and by 1898 it had become the largest hotel in Atlantic City, over 450 rooms on the boardwalk at Illinois Avenue. But the building that Edward Nowak knew, the building with the yellow domes that could be seen from the train window before the train reached the station, that building opened in June 1915. William Price, a Philadelphia architect who had already built the Marlborough Blenheim down the boardwalk in reinforced concrete, designed the Traymore as the largest poured concrete hotel structure in the world. 600 rooms. Paired Moorish domes in yellow tile. Bay windows angled so that nearly every room had a view of the Atlantic. 4 faucets in every bathtub, hot and cold fresh water, hot and cold ocean water, and an ice water tap in the sink. A submarine grill in the basement with murals by N.C. Wyeth. A glass-enclosed dining room. A ballroom. The hotel called itself the Castle by the Sea. It was not wrong. But the castle was not for kings. It was for Edward Nowak. It was for the shipping clerk who could not, in February in South Philadelphia, walk into a room with a captain who knew which table was his table. The Traymore gave him that room in July. It gave him the dining room and the boardwalk rolling chair and the lobby where the reservation letter from April meant that somebody knew he was coming. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of the American Beach Hotel between 1920 and 1980, the lobby, the dining room, the pool terrace, the Saturday night ballroom, the staff who knew which table was yours before you sat down, and what each of these things meant for the specific people who organized their year-around being in them. Not nostalgia for old swimming pools. The documented social reality of an institution that gave some Americans a dining room captain who knew their name and turned other Americans away at the reservation desk. What did the Traymore's dining room on a Saturday evening in July 1948 give a Philadelphia shipping clerk's family that the motel on the Black Horse Pike in 1972 could not? And if you stayed in these hotels, or your family did, put it in the comments. Did your family ever stay at one of the big Atlantic City boardwalk hotels, the Traymore, the Marlborough Blenheim, the Dennis, the Chalfont Haddon Hall? What do you remember about walking into the lobby with the suitcases, or the dining room on your first night, or the rolling chairs on the boardwalk? Next video, the Marlborough Blenheim, the fireproof palace next door that outlived the Traymore by 6 years and met the wrecking ball for a casino. Back to the lobby. What had William Price designed the lobby of the Traymore to do, and what did the reinforced concrete, the yellow domes, and the glass-enclosed dining room have to do with what a boardwalk hotel was supposed to give a family that had taken the train from Philadelphia for 7 days in July? What William Price had designed the lobby to do was to tell Edward Nowak, before he reached the front desk, what kind of week this was going to be. The lobby of the Traymore was not efficient. It was theatrical. High ceilings with Moorish plasterwork. Columns that belonged in a building that took itself seriously. Wicker chairs arranged not for waiting but for sitting, for the guest who treated the lobby as a room in the hotel she had come to use, not a hallway between the front door and the elevator. The lobby told the guest, "This is not where you sleep. This is where you are." And the Boardwalk told them the same thing. Before you can understand why Edward Nowak had sent the reservation letter in April, you need to understand what the Atlantic City Boardwalk was in 1948. It was the world's first boardwalk, opened in 1870, originally built to keep sand out of the railroad cars. By 1948 it was 5 miles of wooden planks along the ocean, lined with grand hotels on one side and the Atlantic on the other, and it had developed a social institution found nowhere else in the American resort world, the rolling chair. A wicker pushchair, canopied and upholstered, pushed along the boardwalk by an attendant. Introduced in 1887. By the 1940s, hundreds of them moved along the planks every summer afternoon and evening. A family that could not afford a private car and driver in Philadelphia could be pushed along the boardwalk in a rolling chair in Atlantic City and experience, for the length of the ride, the specific sensation of being conveyed, of being the passenger, not the walker. The rolling chair, the dining room, the lobby, the Traymore organized, for 7 days in July, a life in which Edward Nowak was served. In which somebody else pushed the chair, somebody else set the table, somebody else knew which floor was quieter. The hotel did not merely provide a room. It provided a social architecture, a structure of occasions and services that organized his week into something his year in South Philadelphia did not contain. But the people who pushed the rolling chairs. The people who set the tables. The people who carried the 3 suitcases to the 5th floor. Who were they, and what did their presence in the hotel, and their absence from the hotel's guest register, say about what the Traymore's social architecture was actually built on? The people who carried Edward Nowak's 3 suitcases were the same people who had built the railroad that brought him to Atlantic City. They were the same people who served his dinner in the glass-enclosed dining room, who pushed his rolling chair along the boardwalk, who made his bed in the oceanside room above the 5th floor. They were black. Before you can understand what the Traymore gave Edward Nowak, you need to understand what it took from the people who made it possible for the Traymore to give Edward Nowak anything at all. Historian Nelson Johnson, who wrote the book that became the television series, called Atlantic City a plantation by the sea. The term is precise. By his account, roughly 95% of the resort's workforce before the Great Depression was African American. They built the railroads. They staffed every kitchen, every dining room, every bellhop station, every housekeeping floor. They pushed the rolling chairs. The Traymore's social architecture, the lobby that told Edward Nowak he was a guest, the dining room where the captain knew his table, the room where the bed was made before he arrived, that architecture ran on black labor. And the same architecture excluded the people whose labor ran it. After about 1900, when white tourists from the Jim Crow South complained, Atlantic City formally segregated its beaches and its hotels. Black visitors, including the families of the men who carried the suitcases and set the tables, were restricted to a single stretch of sand at Missouri Avenue, in front of Convention Hall. They called it Chicken Bone Beach. The grand hotels of the Boardwalk, the Traymore, the Marlborough Blenheim, the Dennis, the Claridge, did not accept black guests. The reservation letter that Edward Nowak sent in April was a letter that a black shipping clerk from North Philadelphia could not have sent and received the same answer. The Boardwalk hotels gave Edward Nowak the institution. They gave the men who ran the institution a neighborhood. It was called the North Side. What was the North Side, and what had the people who were turned away from the Traymore's front desk built for themselves in the 80 blocks where Atlantic City had decided they were permitted to live? The North Side was roughly 80 square blocks. It was where Atlantic City had decided its black population would live, confined by redlining, by custom, by the geography of a city that needed their labor and did not want to see them at the hotel pool. By the 1920 census, nearly 11,000 black residents lived in Atlantic City, about 22% of the city's population. In summer, when the hotel workforce swelled, the share approached 40%. The North Side absorbed them all. And the North Side built. When the Boardwalk hotels said no, the North Side said yes, and what it built was not a shadow of the Grand Hotel. It was its own social architecture. The Liberty Hotel, opened in 1928, was listed in the Green Book and advertised in the Baltimore Afro-American. Sarah Spencer Washington, the beauty products entrepreneur, built the Apex Hotel. Boarding houses, between 20 and 50 in peak years, per Green Book listings, took in the families that the Traymore would not. And on Kentucky Avenue, the North Side built its nightlife. Club Harlem, opened in 1935, drew performers who played for black and white audiences alike: Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Sammy Davis Jr. The Paradise Club, Grace's Little Belmont, Wonder Gardens. A city within a city. The North Side was not a consolation prize. It was a community built by people who had been told they could work in the castle but could not sleep in it. The bellhop who carried Edward Nowak's suitcases to the 5th floor went home to the North Side. The rolling chair attendant who pushed a white family past the Traymore's domed facade at sunset went home to the North Side. The dining room waiter who knew which table was whose went home to the North Side. They had built, in 80 blocks, a parallel social world that the Grand Hotel's exclusion had made necessary. What changed, and when did the front desk of the Traymore Hotel stop turning away the guest who could not be turned away? The Civil Rights Act of 1964 changed the law. It said the Traymore could not turn a guest away because of the color of their skin. The Boardwalk marker that records the moment says it plainly: with the passage of the act, all Atlantic City beaches were open to everyone. What the law changed and what it did not change are two different things. It opened the front desk. It opened the dining room. It opened the beach. It did not open the decades of accumulated social architecture that had been designed, from the lobby furniture to the reservation system, for one kind of guest. A black family walking into the Traymore in the summer of 1965 was walking into a building that had spent 50 years learning to recognize Edward Nowak and 50 years learning not to see them. The captain knew Nowak's table. He did not know theirs. The lobby told Nowak he was expected. It told them nothing because it had never expected them before. And the law that opened the Boardwalk hotels did something else that no one had intended. It made the North Side's parallel economy unnecessary. The Liberty Hotel, the boarding houses, the businesses that had served a community confined to 80 blocks, they lost their reason for existing. When the guest could walk into the Traymore, the guest stopped walking into the Liberty. The North Side, which had been built by exclusion, was hollowed out by inclusion. The Civil Rights Act gave black families access to the Boardwalk. It took from the North Side the economic base that exclusion had forced into existence. By the time the law opened the Traymore's front desk, the Traymore had something else to worry about. Something that no law could fix. Something that had to do with air conditioning, an expressway, and a jet flight to Nassau. What was happening to Atlantic City in the 1960s, and why did the castle by the sea, which had survived a storm in 1884, a world war, and half a century of summers, not survive the decade that was supposed to open it to everyone? 3 things killed the Traymore. None of them was a wrecking ball. The first was the expressway. The Atlantic City Expressway opened in 2 stages, the first leg in July 1964, the final stretch into the city in July 1965. It was supposed to bring more visitors. It did. But it brought them for the day. A family that had once taken the train from Philadelphia and stayed for a week could now drive down in 90 minutes, walk the boardwalk, eat on the pier, and drive home before dark. The expressway made Atlantic City accessible. It made the hotel unnecessary. The second was air conditioning. By the early 1960s, the window unit had become common in working-class and middle-class American homes. The entire economic premise of the Atlantic City Summer Hotel, escape the heat of the city for a week in a room with an ocean breeze, had been quietly undone by a machine that cost less than 3 nights at the Traymore. The family that had needed the ocean to sleep in August no longer needed the ocean. The backyard swimming pool finished what the air conditioner had started. The third was the jet. Eastern Airlines and Pan American offered cheap winter charter flights to Nassau, Jamaica, and later the Caribbean islands. The guest who could choose stopped choosing Atlantic City. Miami Beach took the winter trade. The Caribbean took the adventurous middle class. Atlantic City was left with the guests who could not choose, and with hotels that had been built to serve 600 guests a night and were filling 200 rooms on a good weekend. The 1964 Democratic National Convention came to Atlantic City and brought, for the first time, national press cameras that looked at the boardwalk and saw not the castle by the sea but the peeling paint behind it. The convention broadcast the decay. The guests who had not yet noticed. By 1968, The Traymore spent $5 million on renovations, new elevators, air conditioning, a convention wing. It was not enough. The hotel that had opened its doors in 1915 to 600 guests closed them in October 1971. The lobby that had known Edward Nowak's name was empty. What happened to the castle by the sea on the morning of April 27, 1972, and what did the cloud of concrete dust that rose above the Boardwalk tell Atlantic City about what it had lost? On the morning of April 27, 1972, the first charges went off. Jack Loiseau's Controlled Demolition Incorporated, from Towson, Maryland, had wired the building that William Price had designed to last forever. The full demolition took a month. The final blast came on May 26, 1972. 600 rooms. 181,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete. The largest building ever demolished by explosives. The cloud of dust rose above the boardwalk and settled on the beach. Where the yellow domes had been, there was sky. The Traymore had been on the National Register of Historic Places for exactly 19 days, listed on December 13, 1971, removed on January 1, 1972, when the building was gone. The site became a parking lot. 4 years later, in November 1976, New Jersey voters approved casino gambling for Atlantic City. 2 years after that, Resorts International opened the first casino in the converted Chalfont Haddon Hall, the Quaker-owned, alcohol-free hotel down the boardwalk that had spent the war years as a military hospital. The Marlborough Blenheim, Price's other masterpiece, was demolished in 1978 to make way for Bally's. One by one, the grand hotels that had given Atlantic City its social architecture, the Breakers, the Chelsea, the Brighton, the Shelburne, came down. The lobbies that had known their guests' names became casino floors that did not need to. The filmmaker Louis Malle used footage of the Traymore's implosion to open his 1980 film. It was the right image. The dust cloud rising above the boardwalk was not just a building coming down. It was the end of an idea, the idea that a hotel could be a social institution, a place that organized, for 1 week in July, a specific performance of an American life that the rest of the year did not contain. Edward Nowak's son drove to Atlantic City in the summer of 1978. He had his father's reservation habits. He had the suitcases. He did not have the Traymore. Where the castle by the sea had stood, there was a parking lot and, beyond it, the sound of slot machines from the building that had been the Chalfont Haddon Hall. The Traymore was not torn down for a casino. That is the common mistake, and it matters. The Traymore was torn down in 1972 because no one was coming. The casino vote did not happen until 1976. The first casino did not open until 1978. The Traymore died of the expressway, the air conditioner, and the jet plane. It died because the specific social institution it had been built to house, the lobby as a rival theater, the dining room with a captain who knew your table, the rolling chair that made you a passenger in your own vacation, no longer had enough guests who knew what it was for. What the Traymore had known since 1915 was this: a hotel is not a room. A room is what you sleep in. A hotel is what you arrive at, what you dress for, what you walk into on a Saturday evening in July wearing something that your life in South Philadelphia has no occasion for. The lobby told you that the week had started. The dining room told you that someone had been expecting you. The boardwalk told you that you were, for 7 days, in a place where the rolling chair and the ocean and the dress from the second suitcase all made sense at the same time. The motel on the Black Horse Pike gave you a room. It gave you a bed and a parking space and a swimming pool behind a chain-link fence. It did not give you a lobby that knew your name. It did not give you a captain who knew your table. It did not give you a reason to pack 2 suitcases by category. It did not need to. It was not trying to be an institution. It was trying to be a room. What was lost was not the building. The building was concrete. Concrete can be demolished in 22 seconds. What was lost was the institution, the specific social architecture that had known, since 1915, what the dress in the second suitcase was for. The motel did not know. The casino did not know. The Holiday Inn on the Strip did not know. The Traymore had known. The parking lot that replaced it had no opinion on the matter. If this channel is going to keep documenting what the American Beach Hotel was and what it meant to the people who shaped their year around it, subscribe. There are more lobbies, more dining rooms, more Saturday night dinner dances, more guests who pack 2 suitcases by category, and more families with the green book open to the beach hotel listings. What did the Traymore's glass-enclosed dining room give a shipping clerk's family from South Philadelphia that no motel coffee shop on the Black Horse Pike was designed to provide? And if you have a hotel, a lobby, a dining room, a pool terrace, a week, put it in the comments. Did your family ever stay at the Traymore, or the Marlborough Blenheim, or the Dennis, and do you remember the rolling chairs, or the dining room on the first night, or what the lobby looked like when you walked in with the suitcases? Next video, the Marlborough Blenheim, the fireproof palace next door that outlived the Traymore by 6 years and met the wrecking ball for a casino. Edward Nowak's son stood on the boardwalk in July 1978 where the Traymore had been. He had the suitcases. He had the reservation habits. The lobby was a parking lot. The dining room was a memory. The rolling chairs were still there, they are still there, moving along the planks in front of the gap where the castle by the sea had stood. The chairs still knew what to do. The building that had known what to do with the rest of the week was gone.